I'm excited to welcome you to my channel. Before I dive into my story, don't forget to hit the subscribe button. The soft light of dawn had just begun to break over the horizon, casting a pale glow on the towering pines that framed Hayden Lake. Jacob Miller's alarm clock had gone off hours earlier, but he hadn't needed it. He was already awake, as he often was before a fishing trip, his mind running through the checklist of gear and tactics he'd perfected over years of chasing northern pike. His small cabin, nestled among the trees a few miles from the lake, was a testament to his passion. The walls were adorned with framed photos of past catches, fishing rods in various states of use, and shelves lined with tackle boxes. Each item had a story, a memory of battles won and lost on the waters of North Idaho. Jacob moved with the practiced ease of someone who had done this 1,000 times before. He dressed in layers, pulling on thermal underwear, thick wool socks, and his weathered fishing jacket. The air outside was still cold, despite the calendar insisting that spring was just around the corner. It didn't matter to Jacob. This was his time, the early season when the ice began to retreat, and the big pike started to stir. His boots crunched on the frost-covered gravel as he loaded his gear into the back of his truck. Rods, tackle boxes, a cooler, and the ever-reliable thermos filled with hot coffee. Each item was carefully placed in its spot, a ritual as old as his love for fishing. Jacob paused for a moment, looking up at the stars that were beginning to fade in the early light, breathing in the crisp morning air. It was the kind of cold that bit at your nose and cheeks, but it also sharpened the senses, waking him up in a way that no cup of coffee could. The drive to Hayden Lake was short but scenic, winding through dense forests that slowly opened up to reveal glimpses of the water. The lake itself was still cloaked in a thin veil of mist, the surface calm and reflective. Patches of ice lingered stubbornly along the shore, the last remnants of winter. Jacob loved these early spring days, when the lake was quiet, and he could feel like it belonged to him alone. As he pulled into the small parking area near the boat launch, Jacob could already sense that today was going to be different. There was a certain stillness in the air, a kind of anticipation that hung over the water. He unloaded his gear, moving with the same deliberate pace, savoring the familiarity of it all. There was something deeply satisfying about these moments before a trip, before the first cast, before the first bite. It was a time of possibilities, where every fish was still out there waiting to be caught. With everything in place, Jacob finally slid his boat into the water. The sound of it cutting through the glassy surface echoed in the quiet morning. He climbed in, started the motor, and slowly made his way out to his favorite spot, just beyond the ice's edge. The sun was beginning to rise, casting long shadows across the lake, and turning the sky into a palette of oranges and pinks. Jacob smiled to himself as he cut the engine and let the boat drift to a stop. This was his time, his place, and as always, he was ready for whatever the lake had in store for him. The tires of Jacob Miller's truck crunched over the gravel road as he navigated the final stretch to Hayden Lake. The road was familiar, winding through the dense pine forest that surrounded the lake, each twist and turn etched into Jacob's memory from years of early morning drives just like this one. The truck's headlights cut through the pre-dawn gloom, revealing fleeting glimpses of the forest that still held onto the shadows of night. As he neared the lake, the road opened up, and the first hint of water appeared through the trees, a dark, shimmering line that signaled the edge of Hayden Lake. The air here was different, colder, with a dampness that clung to the skin and a faint smell of pine and earth that Jacob always found comforting. He slowed the truck as he approached the small parking area near the boat launch, his eyes scanning the shoreline out of habit. Hayden Lake stretched out before him, a vast expanse of water that was both familiar and mysterious. The surface was still mostly covered with thin sheets of ice, the remnants of winter stubbornly holding on despite the approaching spring. The ice glistened in the first light of dawn, reflecting hues of blue and silver as the sun began its slow ascent in the east. The lake was quiet, almost eerily so, with only the occasional cry of a distant bird breaking the silence. Jacob parked his truck in its usual spot, right near the boat launch, where he could unload his gear with ease. He cut the engine, and for a moment, he simply sat there, taking it all in. The world was still asleep, and the lake belonged to him alone, a sanctuary untouched by the noise and bustle of daily life. This was the moment he cherished most, the stillness, the calm before the day's adventure began. As he stepped out of the truck, the cold air hit him, sharp and invigorating. His breath came out in visible puffs, disappearing quickly into the morning chill. Jacob paused to stretch, feeling the satisfying pull of muscles that were about to be put to the test. He looked around, surveying the lake and its surroundings. The pine trees that lined the shore stood tall and silent, their dark silhouettes stark against the lightning sky. The water beyond the ice was flat and mirror-like, reflecting the growing light as the sky transitioned from deep blue to soft pink and orange. Jacob walked to the back of the truck and began unloading his gear. Each item was handled with care: the rods, the tackle boxes, the cooler filled with snacks and drinks. The boat was last, a small but sturdy craft that had seen him through countless fishing trips. He slid it off the trailer and into the water, the sound of the hull meeting the lake's surface a familiar and comforting one. The boat rocked gently as it settled, a small ripple disturbing the glassy water before fading into the distance. With everything unloaded, Jacob took a moment to breathe in the crisp morning air. The lake was mostly deserted, save for a few ducks paddling near the shore, leaving faint trails in the thin ice that was starting to crack and retreat under the warming sun. The sun, now just cresting the tree line, cast long, golden rays across the lake, igniting the ice in a brilliant display of light. It was a sight Jacob never tired of, a reminder of why he returned to this spot time and again. He moved with the steady, deliberate pace of someone who had done this 100 times before. His hands, clad in thick gloves, worked quickly and efficiently, securing the rods in their holders, checking the tackle, and making sure everything was in place for the day ahead. The anticipation in his chest grew with each passing minute, a familiar flutter of excitement mixed with the calm confidence of experience. Finally, with everything ready, Jacob climbed into the boat and pushed off from the shore. The boat glided smoothly over the water, leaving a wake that disturbed the perfect stillness. As he moved farther from the shore, the lake opened up before him, a wide expanse of possibility. The ice ended abruptly a few dozen yards out, giving way to dark, inviting water. Jacob steered the boat toward his favorite spot, just beyond the ice's edge, where he knew the big pike would be lurking. As he cut the engine and let the boat drift to a stop, Jacob felt the familiar thrill of the unknown. The lake was quiet, serene, but he knew that beneath the calm surface, something much more exciting awaited. The sun was now fully risen, casting a warm, golden light over the water, making the ice sparkle like a field of diamonds. It was a perfect morning for fishing, and Jacob was ready for whatever the day might bring. The sun had just started to climb higher in the sky, casting a soft, golden light across Hayden Lake. The thin layer of mist that had hung over the water began to dissipate, revealing the clear, glassy surface beneath. Jacob Miller was in his element, standing in his small boat, which now drifted silently near the edge of the ice. He could feel the crisp morning air on his face, a mix of coolness from the lingering winter and the warmth of the rising sun. The lake was calm, almost unnaturally still, as if holding its breath, waiting for the first ripple to break the surface. Jacob reached down and picked up his favorite rod, its grip worn smooth from years of use. The rod felt comfortable in his hand, an extension of himself, as natural as breathing. It was rigged with 80-pound test line, thick and strong enough to handle whatever lurked in the deep waters below. Attached to the end was his go-to lure, a large, silver spoon that gleamed in the morning light. This lure had a history, a proven track record of enticing the biggest pike in the lake. He had caught many fish with it before, and today, he hoped it would bring him the same luck. He took a moment to check his surroundings, surveying the water for any signs of movement. The ice, still clinging to the shore, cracked occasionally, sending sharp echoes across the otherwise silent lake. A few small patches of open water dotted the surface, the dark, mysterious depths just barely visible beneath. Jacob knew this was where the big pike would be hiding, waiting in the cold, shadowy depths for an easy meal to swim by. With a practiced motion, Jacob flicked the bail open on his reel and let out a few feet of line. He then drew the rod back, feeling the tension build as the lure dangled at the end, ready to be cast. His eyes narrowed as he focused on a spot just beyond the edge of the ice, where the water was deep and still. The area looked promising, a likely haunt for a trophy-sized pike. Taking a deep breath, he whipped the rod forward, releasing the line at just the right moment. The lure sailed through the air in a perfect arc, its silver body catching the sunlight as it flew. Time seemed to slow as the lure made its descent, finally hitting the water with a soft, satisfying plunk. The surface rippled out from the impact, disturbing the mirror-like calm of the lake. Jacob watched intently as the lure began to sink, the line peeling off his reel in smooth, steady motions. He could almost feel the lure descending through the water column, moving deeper and deeper until it reached the bottom. This was the moment he loved most, the quiet anticipation, the feeling of being on the edge of something big. As the lure sank, Jacob let his mind clear, focusing solely on the task at hand. He knew the importance of patience in these moments. Pike were ambush predators, lurking in the shadows, waiting for the perfect opportunity to strike. He let the line sink for a few more seconds, ensuring that the lure reached the depths where the largest fish often hid. His fingers hovered over the reel, ready to engage as soon as he felt the telltale tug of a bite. The lure finally reached the bottom, and Jacob engaged the reel, tightening the line ever so slightly. He gave the rod a few gentle jerks, making the lure dance just above the lake bed, mimicking the movements of a wounded fish. The technique was simple but effective, one he had honed over countless hours on the water. His eyes remained locked on the line, searching for any sign of movement, any indication that something had taken an interest in his offering. And then, it happened. There was a sudden, sharp tug on the line, a powerful jolt that nearly pulled the rod from his hands. Jacob's heart skipped a beat as he felt the unmistakable force of a large fish on the other end. He instantly knew this wasn't just any fish, this was something big, something special. The line began to peel out from his reel at an alarming rate, the drag screaming in protest. As the fish made its first run, Jacob tightened his grip on the rod, his muscles tensing as he prepared for the battle ahead. He could feel the power of the fish through the rod, a raw, primal force that sent adrenaline surging through his veins. The pike was heading straight for deeper water, pulling line with a relentless determination. Jacob let it run, knowing that trying to muscle the fish into early could end in disaster. He had the heavy-duty gear for a reason, and now it was being put to the ultimate test. The first cast had turned into something extraordinary, something that could only be described as a fisherman's dream. Jacob could barely contain his excitement, yet he remained focused, knowing that this was just the beginning of what would surely be a legendary fight. The sun continued to rise, casting a brilliant glow over the lake, but Jacob's world had shrunk to the narrow span of his rod. The tension in the line, and the unseen behemoth thrashing in the depths below. This was it. This was why he fished, and today, the lake had rewarded him with the promise of a story he would tell for years to come. But Jacob was ready. His heart pounded with excitement, his breath coming in short, adrenaline-fueled bursts as he regained control of the line. This was the moment he had been waiting for, the culmination of years spent honing his skills on these very waters. The fight was far from over, but Jacob knew he was in for the battle of a lifetime. The strike had set the stage for an epic struggle, one that would test his strength, skill, and resolve to their limits. As he tightened his grip on the rod and prepared for the next round, Jacob couldn't help but smile. This was why he fished, why he spent countless hours on Hayden Lake in pursuit of these elusive giants. And today, the lake had rewarded him with a challenge that would push him to the very edge of his abilities. The moment the giant pike hit Jacob's lure, the battle was on. The initial strike had been powerful, but now the real fight began, a tug-of-war between man and beast, with neither willing to yield. The rod in Jacob's hands was bowed sharply, the tension in the line so intense it felt like it could snap at any moment. The pike was deep, using the full force of its muscular body to stay pinned to the lake bed, refusing to be pulled up. Jacob planted his feet firmly in the boat, bracing himself as the fish made its move. The rod pulsed in his hands with the pike's every thrash and shake, the vibrations traveling up his arms and into his chest, making his heart race even faster. He knew he had hooked something extraordinary, something that would take every ounce of skill and experience he possessed to bring in. The pike was relentless, using its sheer weight and strength to its advantage. It hugged the bottom, refusing to give an inch, and every time Jacob tried to reel in a bit of line, the fish would surge forward with renewed vigor, ripping the line back out with a force that nearly pulled the rod from his hands. The reel's drag was screaming, the line spooling out faster than he could reel it in, creating a high-pitched whine that filled the otherwise quiet morning air. Jacob knew he had to be patient. This wasn't his first time battling a big fish, but it was clear that this one was different. The pike had size, power, and the cunning of an old warrior. It was using every trick in the book, staying deep and close to the bottom, where it could leverage its strength to the fullest. Jacob leaned back slightly, using his body weight to counterbalance the fish's powerful runs, careful not to exert too much pressure and risk breaking the line. For what felt like hours, but was only minutes, the fish continued to strip line off the reel, taking Jacob's best efforts and tossing them aside with brute force. He could feel the pike's every move, the powerful thrashes transmitted through the rod, each one a reminder of the battle unfolding beneath the surface. The fish would go on a long, hard run, then pause, holding steady at the bottom as if daring Jacob to make the next move. Jacob's muscles began to burn, a dull ache spreading through his arms and shoulders as he fought to keep control. The cold air stung his face, but he barely noticed, his focus entirely on the rod in his hands and the fish on the other end of the line. He could feel the weight of the pike pulling against him, a constant pressure that never let up, as if the fish was testing his endurance as much as he was testing hers. The boat rocked gently on the lake, the stillness of the morning broken only by the sounds of the struggle, the creak of the rod, the whir of the reel, and the occasional splash as the pike made another desperate attempt to dive even deeper. Jacob adjusted his grip, his fingers wrapped tightly around the rod handle, his knuckles white with the effort. He knew he had to keep the tension steady, not too tight to break the line, but not too loose to give the fish a chance to spit the hook. Suddenly, the pike shifted tactics. Instead of staying deep, it began to swim in wide, powerful circles, using the full range of the lake to its advantage. The line cut through the water in a wide arc, creating ripples that spread out across the surface. Jacob followed the fish's movements, turning the rod and adjusting his position in the boat, keeping the line taut. The fish was trying to tire him out, and Jacob knew it. But he was determined not to let the pike gain the upper hand. Each turn, each twist of the line brought new challenges. The pike would occasionally make a sudden, sharp run, testing the limits of Jacob's reflexes, trying to catch him off guard. But Jacob was ready, responding to each move with the precision of an experienced angler. He would give the fish just enough line to keep it from breaking free, but not enough to let it run too far. It was a delicate balance, a dance of give and take, where one wrong move could spell disaster. As the battle wore on, Jacob could feel the pike starting to tire. The runs were becoming shorter, less frantic, and the fish wasn't pulling as much line as it had in the beginning. But Jacob knew better than to rush things. A fish this size wouldn't go down easily, and he had to be prepared for one final surge. He kept the pressure steady, slowly working the fish closer to the surface, feeling the tension in the line as he reeled it in. Inch by inch, the pike made one last, desperate attempt to dive, its powerful tail churning the water into a froth. Jacob held firm, his arms trembling with the strain, his heart pounding in his chest. He could feel the fish beginning to weaken, its movements becoming more sluggish, less coordinated. But even in its exhaustion, the pike fought with every ounce of strength it had left, refusing to surrender. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, Jacob began to see the telltale signs that the battle was nearing its end. The line was coming in more easily, and the rod wasn't bending as deeply as before. The pike was coming up, drawn closer to the surface with each turn of the reel. Jacob's breath came in short, controlled bursts as he focused on the final steps of the fight. The water around the boat was still, the mist having completely lifted, leaving a clear, bright morning in its wake. He knew that the most dangerous moment in any fight was when the fish was close to the surface, where it could make one last explosive run if startled. Jacob kept the pressure on, his hands steady on the rod, his eyes locked on the spot where the line disappeared into the water. He could feel the fish now, sluggish but still powerful, and he knew it wouldn't be long before he saw it. And then, with a final pull, the pike broke the surface, its massive head appearing first, followed by the rest of its enormous, silver-green body. The fish thrashed weakly, water spraying as it tried to break free, but it was clear that the fight had taken its toll. Jacob felt a surge of triumph as he brought the pike alongside the boat, reaching for his net with one hand, while keeping the rod steady with the other. The pike was a true monster, far bigger than anything Jacob had ever caught before. As he maneuvered the net under the fish and lifted it out of the water, the full weight of the fish nearly pulled him off balance. He grinned despite the burning in his arms and the sweat on his brow, knowing that this was the moment he had been waiting for, the culmination of all his efforts, and the battle he would remember for the rest of his life. Just when Jacob Miller thought he was gaining control of the battle, the pike made a move that took him completely by surprise. The line, which had been taut and pulsing with the fish's powerful runs, suddenly went slack. It was a terrifying moment for any angler, a sudden lack of tension that usually signaled the worst. The fish might have thrown the hook and escaped into the depths. Jacob's heart lurched in his chest as the rod tip straightened, and for a brief second, he feared that the epic battle was over before he could even lay eyes on the beast. But Jacob's instincts told him to stay calm. Northern pike were known for their unpredictability, and this wasn't his first encounter with a wily opponent. He quickly reeled in the slack line, his fingers moving with practiced speed as he tried to regain contact with the fish. He could feel his pulse pounding in his temples, a mix of anxiety and adrenaline fueling his every motion. He knew he had to act fast. If the pike was coming toward him, he needed to be ready for whatever came next. And then, out of nowhere, the lake's surface erupted. The water, which had been calm and reflective just moments before, exploded in a shower of droplets as the massive pike launched itself into the air. Time seemed to slow as Jacob watched, transfixed, as the fish's full length arced above the water, its body twisting and contorting in a desperate attempt to shake the hook free. The pike's scales caught the sunlight, flashing a brilliant silver green that glistened like molten metal, each movement accentuating the sheer size and power of the fish. For a moment, Jacob could only stare, awestruck by the sight of this aquatic giant in mid-air. The pike was enormous, easily the largest he had ever seen. Its head was broad and flat, its mouth wide open in a fierce display of razor-sharp teeth that glinted menacingly in the sunlight. Its eyes, cold and predatory, seemed to lock onto Jacob, as if challenging him in this final, dramatic showdown. The fish's body was a muscular torpedo, every inch of it designed for speed and power. And as it thrashed in the air, Jacob could see the full extent of its strength. Water droplets sprayed in all directions as the pike twisted its massive body, trying with all its might to throw the hook that had embedded itself in its bony mouth. The fish's powerful tail whipped back and forth, sending waves crashing down into the lake. Jacob's line went taut again, pulling him back to the reality of the situation. He tightened his grip on the rod, muscles straining as he fought to keep the fish from tearing away. The pike's aerial display was breathtaking, but it was also a desperate move, a last-ditch effort by the fish to escape its fate. Jacob knew he had to be ready for the moment the pike re-entered the water. He needed to maintain tension on the line without snapping it under the strain. His hands were steady, but his heart raced as he focused on the fish's every move, ready to react the instant it hit the water. The pike reached the apex of its leap, and for a split second, it hung in the air, almost suspended in time. Then, with a thunderous splash, it crashed back into the lake, sending waves rippling out in all directions. The force of the impact rocked Jacob's boat, making it sway beneath him. He could feel the pike dive deep again, using its remaining energy to try and escape. The line sizzled through the water, the reels dragged screaming in protest as the fish pulled with renewed fury. But Jacob was ready. He kept the rod tip high, letting the fish run, but keeping just enough tension to prevent it from gaining too much distance. His arms burned from the effort, but he held firm, refusing to let the fish dictate the terms of the fight. He knew that the pike had expended a tremendous amount of energy in its aerial assault, and now it was time to capitalize on its momentary weakness. The boat continued to rock gently in the aftermath of the pike's splashdown, the water around it still churning with the remnants of the fish's powerful dive. Jacob could feel the pike pulling, but its movements were more sluggish now, less coordinated. He knew the fish was tiring, but he also knew that a fish this size wouldn't go down without one last fight. As the pike dove deeper, Jacob applied steady pressure, slowly reeling in the line. He could feel the fish's strength waning with each turn of the reel, but he remained vigilant, knowing that the pike could still muster another surprise attack. His mind raced through the possibilities: another dive, another run, or maybe even another attempt to breach the surface. But whatever the fish had left, Jacob was determined to be ready. The sun was now fully risen, casting a golden glow across the lake and making the water sparkle like a field of diamonds. Jacob could feel the warmth on his face, contrasting sharply with the cool morning air that still clung to the shadows under the trees. He took a deep breath, steadying himself for the final stages of the battle. The Pike's aerial assault had been a sight to behold, but now it was time to bring this behemoth to the boat. With every inch of line he regained, Jacob could feel the fish drawing closer, its once powerful pulls now reduced to weaker tugs. The lake had returned to its serene state, the water smooth and undisturbed save for the occasional ripple caused by the fish's waning efforts. Jacob's focus was absolute, his senses heightened by the adrenaline coursing through his veins. The pike had shown its strength, its cunning, and its ferocity, but Jacob was determined to see this battle through to the end. Finally, as the tension in the line began to ease, Jacob caught sight of the fish again, this time just beneath the surface. The pike was enormous, its body moving slowly now, as if resigned to its fate. Jacob could see the glint of his lures still lodged in the fish's mouth, a small piece of metal that had sparked one of the greatest fights of his life. He knew that the end was near, but he also knew that he couldn't let his guard down not until the fish was safely in his net. As the pike neared the boat, Jacob readied the net with one hand, keeping the rod steady with the other. His breath came in short, controlled bursts, each one a reminder to stay calm, to focus on the task at hand. The pike made one last feeble attempt to pull away, but it was no match for Jacob's resolve. With a swift, practiced motion, he guided the fish into the net, the weight of the pike nearly pulling him off balance. As he lifted it out of the water, the fish thrashed weakly in the net, its strength spent, but Jacob held on, his heart pounding with a mix of exhaustion and exhilaration. The pike was massive, far bigger than anything he had ever caught before, and as he pulled it into the boat, he couldn't help but marvel at its sheer size and power. The aerial assault had been the fish's final stand, a breathtaking display of raw energy and determination, but in the end, it had been no match for Jacob's experience and tenacity. As he gazed down at the giant pike now lying in his boat, Jacob knew that this was a catch he would never forget, a battle that would become the stuff of legend, a story to be told and retold for years to come. The sun continued to rise, casting long shadows across the water as the day began in earnest, but for Jacob, the real victory had already been won. The pike's aerial assault had taken a toll on both Jacob Miller and the fish itself. The massive pike had put on a spectacular show, launching its body out of the water in a desperate attempt to break free, but now it was tiring, its powerful thrashes growing weaker with each passing moment. As the fish settled back into the depths, Jacob knew the moment of truth was approaching, the final, nerve-wracking task of landing the behemoth. The pike had fought hard, but Jacob could feel its strength waning. The line, once taut and vibrating with the raw power of the fish, had started to yield to his steady reeling. The boat drifted gently on the calm waters of Hayden Lake, the morning sun casting a warm, golden light across the scene, as if nature itself was holding its breath, waiting for the culmination of this epic battle. Jacob could see the pike now, just beneath the surface. Its massive, silver-green body shimmered in the clear water, the scales reflecting the sunlight in flashes of metallic brilliance. The fish moved sluggishly, its once violent thrashes reduced to slow, deliberate motions as it tried to muster the energy for one last attempt to escape. But the battle had drained it, and Jacob knew that victory was within his grasp if he could just keep his composure and land the fish. His heart pounded with anticipation as he adjusted his stance, bracing himself for the final effort. He leaned forward slightly, gripping the rod with one hand while his other hand reached for the net. The pike was close, so close that he could almost reach out and touch it. But Jacob knew better than to rush this moment. Years of experience had taught him that the last few feet between the fish and the boat were often the most dangerous. One wrong move, and the fish could still slip away. The pike made a feeble attempt to dive, but Jacob was ready. He applied just enough pressure to keep the fish from descending, guiding it back toward the surface with steady, deliberate movements. The rod bent slightly under the strain, but Jacob's grip was firm, his hands steady despite the adrenaline coursing through his veins. The fish was exhausted, its reserves of strength nearly depleted, and Jacob could feel the tension in the line easing as the pike began to surrender to the inevitable, slowly, carefully, Jacob maneuvered the pike alongside the boat. The water around the fish was clear and still, allowing him to fully appreciate the sheer size of the creature he had battled. The pike was enormous, its body a thick, muscular torpedo built for speed and power. Its head was broad and flat, with a wide, gaping mouth lined with rows of sharp, needle-like teeth that glinted ominously in the sunlight. The eyes, cold and glassy, stared up at Jacob with a mix of defiance and resignation, as if the fish understood that its fight was nearly over. Jacob took a deep breath, steadying himself for the final move. With one hand, he held the rod steady, keeping the line taut to prevent the fish from making any sudden, last-ditch attempts to escape. With the other hand, he carefully lowered the net into the water, positioning it just behind the pike's head. He had to be precise. One misstep, and the fish could thrash out of the net's reach, potentially breaking the line or dislodging the hook. The pike, sensing the net's presence, made a weak attempt to pull away, its tail flicking back and forth in a sluggish motion. But it was too late. The fish was too tired to mount a serious escape. Jacob moved quickly, siding the net under the pike's belly and lifting it upward in one smooth motion. The fish thrashed weakly, sending a spray of water into the boat, but Jacob held on, his muscles straining as he hoisted the behemoth out of the lake and into the boat. The weight of the fish was staggering. As the pike settled into the net, Jacob could feel the strain on his arms and shoulders, the fish's massive body resisting every inch of its ascent. He grunted with the effort, his breath coming in short, controlled bursts as he fought to maintain his balance. The boat rocked gently with the added weight, the water lapping against the hull in soft, rhythmic waves. Finally, with one last surge of effort, Jacob lifted the pike fully into the boat. The fish lay there, its enormous body taking up nearly the entire length of the small craft. Water pooled around it, the scales glistening in the sunlight, each one a tiny, perfect mirror reflecting the sky above. The pike was still alive, its gills flaring and its body twitching slightly, but the fight had gone out of it. It was a magnificent specimen, the kind of fish that most anglers could only dream of catching a true trophy. Jacob stared down at the pike, a mix of awe and disbelief washing over him. This was the fish he had been chasing his entire life, the kind of catch that made all the early mornings, the cold, and the hours of waiting worthwhile. He could hardly believe it was real, that this enormous creature was now lying in his boat, a testament to his skill and perseverance as an angler. He took a moment to catch his breath, his heart still pounding from the exertion and excitement. The sun was now high in the sky, casting a warm, golden light over the lake. The water was calm, the surface smooth and undisturbed, as if the lake itself had returned to its natural state after the chaos of the battle. Birds chirped in the trees along the shoreline, their songs a peaceful contrast to the intensity of the fight that had just taken place. Jacob knew he needed to get an official weight and measurement of the fish, but for now, he allowed himself a moment of quiet reflection. He knelt beside the pike, gently running his hand along its side, feeling the smooth, cold scales under his fingers. The fish was still breathing, its gills moving rhythmically, but it was clearly exhausted, its body spent from the battle. Jacob felt a deep respect for the creature, a recognition of the life it had lived, and the challenge it had presented him. As he looked down at the pike, Jacob felt a surge of pride and satisfaction. This was the culmination of years of dedication, the result of countless hours spent on the water, honing his skills and learning the habits of these elusive giants. The pike had given him everything he could have asked for in a fight: strength, endurance, cunning, and he had met it with everything he had. The victory was hard-earned, and it was all the sweeter for it. With the fish safely in the boat, Jacob reached for his camera, knowing that this was a moment he wanted to capture forever. He carefully positioned the pike for a photo, its massive head resting on the boat's edge, the rest of its body stretching nearly the entire length of the vessel. As he clicked the shutter, he knew that this image would be one he would treasure, a reminder of the day he landed the behemoth that had haunted his dreams. But the day wasn't over yet. Jacob still needed to get the fish weighed and measured officially, to see if it would break the Idaho state record. He knew that no matter what the scales said, this was a catch of a lifetime, but the thought of holding a record was tantalizing. Carefully, he secured the fish in the boat, ensuring it wouldn't slide around or get damaged during the trip back to shore. As Jacob started the motor, and began the slow journey back to the dock. He couldn't help but glance back at the pike, still amazed by the sheer size and beauty of the fish. The boat cut smoothly through the water, leaving a trail of ripples that spread out across the lake surface. The morning's excitement was beginning to fade into a sense of deep contentment, the knowledge that he had accomplished something truly extraordinary. The shoreline approached, and with it, the prospect of sharing his triumph with the world. But for now, as he guided the boat back to where the journey had begun, Jacob allowed himself to savor the moment in solitude. The lake, the fish, the fight, it was all part of a perfect morning that he would carry with him for the rest of his life. And as he reached the dock and prepared to step onto solid ground, he knew that the story of this day was just beginning. With the colossal pike secured in his boat, Jacob Miller's mind shifted to the next critical step, getting an official weight and measurement. He knew that this fish had the potential to break records, and he wasn't about to let the opportunity slip away. The adrenaline from the fight was still coursing through his veins, but now it was tempered by a sense of urgency. The clock was ticking, and he needed to get the fish to a certified scale before its condition deteriorated. Jacob carefully steered his boat toward the dock, the massive pike lying still in the bottom of the vessel. As he approached the shore, he noticed a small group of onlookers had gathered, drawn by the sight of his boat, slowly cutting through the water and perhaps by the thrill of witnessing something extraordinary. Word had spread quickly. Fellow anglers, locals, and even a few early morning joggers were congregating at the dock, curious to see what Jacob had caught. The boat nudged gently against the dock, and Jacob hopped out with a practiced ease, quickly securing the lines before turning his attention back to his prized catch. The onlookers moved closer, their eyes widening as they caught sight of the enormous pike lying in the boat. A murmur of amazement rippled through the crowd, and Jacob could hear snippets of conversation. Words like monster and record floated on the breeze. "That's gotta be a state record," someone said. Leaning over to get a better look, Jacob smiled modestly, but inside, he was buzzing with excitement. He knew it was a possibility, but he needed hard numbers to prove it. He reached into the boat and carefully lifted the pike, cradling its massive body in his arms as he stepped onto the dock. The fish was heavier than anything he had ever lifted before, and he could feel the strain in his muscles as he carried it toward the waiting crowd. "Anyone got a scale?" Jacob asked, his voice steady but urgent. He scanned the faces around him, hoping someone would have the necessary equipment. A fellow angler stepped forward, holding out a portable scale. Jacob quickly placed the pike on the scale, but as soon as the numbers began to climb, it was clear that this scale wasn't going to cut it. The digital readout maxed out at 30 pounds, flashing an error message. The scale struggled to measure the true weight of the fish. "This scale isn't big enough," the angler said, shaking his head as he looked at the fish with wide eyes. "You're gonna need something certified." Jacob nodded, his mind already racing through his options. He knew that to get an official weight, he would need to find a certified scale one capable of handling a fish of this size. He carefully placed the pike back into the boat. Securing it once more, he prepared to head out in search of the right equipment. The crowd offered suggestions, pointing him toward nearby marinas, tackle shops, and even a few restaurants that might have the scales he needed. With a clear plan in mind, Jacob hopped back into the boat and started the motor, the powerful engine roaring to life as he prepared to set off on the next leg of his journey. The group of onlookers waved him off, offering words of encouragement as he pulled away from the dock, the boat leaving a wake of excitement behind. The first stop was a nearby marina known for catering to serious anglers. Jacob had visited it many times before, picking up supplies and chatting with the staff about the latest fishing conditions on the lake. He knew they had a scale that could handle big fish, and he was hopeful it would be up to the task. The boat ride to the marina was brief, but it felt like an eternity as Jacob kept glancing back at the pike, anxious to get an official weight. The water was calm, the sun now fully risen, casting a warm glow over the lake. It was shaping up to be a beautiful day, but Jacob's focus was entirely on the task at hand. As he pulled up to the marina, he quickly docked the boat and grabbed the pike once more, hurrying up to the small office where the scale was kept. The marina staff greeted him with wide eyes as they saw the fish, immediately understanding the urgency of the situation. "Let's get this beauty weighed," one of the staff members said, leading Jacob to the scale. Jacob carefully placed the pike on the scale, holding his breath as the numbers began to climb. The scale beeped as it calculated the weight, and finally, it settled on a number, 37 pounds. A solid weight, but still, Jacob had a feeling the fish was heavier. The pike had spent several minutes out of the water during the drive, and Jacob knew that he needed a certified scale in perfect condition to capture the fish's true weight. This one might be slightly off, the staff member said, confirming Jacob's suspicions. There's another place about 10 minutes from here that has a certified scale. They weigh in a lot of big fish. It's probably your best bet. Jacob thanked them and hurried back to his boat, the urgency mounting as he realized that time was slipping away. The pike was still alive, but it was growing more lethargic with each passing minute. He needed to get to that certified scale quickly, to ensure that the fish was weighed at its peak condition. The boat sped across the lake. The wind whipping through Jacob's hair, he navigated toward the second location. The sun was higher in the sky now, casting sparkling reflections off the water surface. The urgency of the situation weighed heavily on Jacob, but he remained focused, determined to see this through to the end. Finally, he arrived at the second marina, a well-known spot for serious anglers looking to weigh their catches. He docked quickly, rushing up to the scale with the pike in tow. The staff recognized him immediately and understood the importance of the situation. "Let's get that fish weighed," one of them said, leading Jacob to a large, industrial-grade scale that was used for weighing in tournaments. Jacob gently placed the pike on the scale, his breath catching in his throat as the numbers began to climb. The scale ticked upward, past 30 pounds, past 35, and then finally settled on 40.76 pounds. The room went silent for a moment, the significance of the number sinking in. Jacob had done it. He had caught a new state record pike. A cheer erupted from the marina staff as they congratulated Jacob, patting him on the back and shaking his hand. The official weight had been recorded, and it was clear that this fish was going down in history. Jacob stood there, holding the pike with a mixture of pride and disbelief, the weight of his achievement slowly sinking in. This was the moment he had dreamed of, the culmination of years of dedication and countless hours spent on the water. The staff quickly grabbed a tape measure to record the length of the fish, another critical piece of information for the record books. The pike measured over 50 inches, a true giant in every sense of the word. Jacob smiled as he looked at the numbers, knowing that this fish was more than just a record. It was a testament to his passion and perseverance as an angler. With the official weighing complete, Jacob took a moment to reflect on the journey that had brought him here. The battle with the pike, the chase for a certified scale, and now the confirmation that he had caught the biggest northern pike in Idaho's history. It all felt surreal. But as he looked down at the massive fish, he knew that every moment had been worth it. The marina staff helped Jacob take a few more photos with the pike, capturing the moment from every angle. These were the pictures that would tell the story for years to come, a reminder of the day he landed the fish of a lifetime. As he held the pike up for the camera, its massive body stretched out in front of him, Jacob couldn't help but grin from ear to ear. With the photos taken and the record officially set, Jacob knew it was time to return the fish to the lake. He carefully carried the pike back to his boat, cradling it in his arms as he made his way to the water's edge. The crowd that had gathered at the marina watched in silence. Understanding the significance of the moment, Jacob gently lowered the pike into the water, supporting its massive body as it regained its bearings. For a moment, the fish remained still, as if gathering the strength it needed to swim again. Then, with a powerful flick of its tail, the pike surged forward, disappearing into the depths of Hayden Lake. Jacob watched as the ripples faded, the fish returning to the place where their epic battle had begun. As he stood there on the dock, watching the calm waters of the lake, Jacob felt a profound sense of peace and fulfillment. He had accomplished something extraordinary, something that few anglers ever experience. The fish was gone, but the memory of the fight, the thrill of the chase, and the satisfaction of the weigh-in would stay with him forever. The moment Jacob Miller released the pike back into Hayden Lake, a wave of calm washed over him. The massive fish had slipped back into the depths, disappearing with the same grace and power it had shown throughout their epic battle. But even as the ripples smoothed out, Jacob knew that the story of this fish was far from over. The official weight of 40.76 pounds was not just a personal triumph, it was a new Idaho state record, and Jacob could hardly believe that he had secured such a prestigious achievement. After returning to the marina, Jacob was greeted with cheers and congratulations from the small crowd that had gathered. Word had spread quickly among the local anglers and the wider community. The news of a record-breaking pike had traveled faster than Jacob could have imagined. People approached him, shaking his hand, patting him on the back, and asking for details about the catch. The marina, usually a place of quiet activity, buzzed with excitement as more and more people arrived to see the man who had caught the legendary fish. A few reporters from local news outlets had shown up, armed with cameras and notebooks, eager to capture the story of the day. Jacob wasn't used to the attention, but he handled it with a modest smile and a humble demeanor. He recounted the story of the catch, the early morning start, the perfect cast, the pike's relentless fight, and the thrilling aerial assaults that had taken his breath away. The reporters listened intently, scribbling notes and snapping photos as Jacob spoke, clearly enthralled by his tale. One of the reporters asked him, "How does it feel to know that you've just set a new state record?" Jacob paused, taking a moment to reflect before answering. "It feels surreal," he said, his voice steady but filled with emotion. "I've spent so many years on this lake, chasing after pike, and I never thought I'd catch something like this. It's a dream come true, really. But more than that, it's a reminder of why I love fishing so much. It's not just about the catch. It's about the experience, the connection with nature, and the memories you make along the way." The marina staff, recognizing the significance of the moment, decided to commemorate Jacob's achievement with a special plaque, which they promised to have made in his honor. The plaque would be displayed prominently in the marina's office, a testament to the day Jacob Miller caught the biggest northern pike in Idaho's history. They also offered to send the official weights and measurements to the Idaho Fish and Game Department, ensuring that Jacob's record would be entered into the state's books. As the crowd continued to celebrate, Jacob found a quiet moment to step away and process everything that had happened. He walked down the dock, away from the noise and excitement, and found a spot where he could sit and look out over the lake. The water was calm, the late morning sun reflecting off its surface in shimmering patterns. It was hard to believe that just a short time ago, he had been locked in a fierce battle with the pike, his heart racing with every pull of the line. Now, with the fish returned to the lake and the record officially set, Jacob felt a deep sense of satisfaction. This was what he had always loved about fishing, the way it connected him to the natural world, the way it challenged him both physically and mentally, and the way it could surprise him with moments of pure exhilaration and joy. The record was a tremendous honor, but it was the journey to get there that truly mattered to him. As he sat there, lost in thought, Jacob couldn't help but think about the future. This record, while a monumental achievement, was just one chapter in his lifelong passion for fishing. There would be other days on the lake, other fish to catch, and other challenges to face, and while it was unlikely that he would ever catch another pike like the one he had just released, the possibility of the next big one always lingered in the back of his mind, fueling his determination to keep coming back to the water. The quiet moments by the lake allowed Jacob to reflect on how far he had come. He thought about the countless mornings he had spent alone on the water, the hours of practice and patience that had led him to this day. He thought about the friends he had made along the way, the stories they had shared, and the memories they had created together. Fishing had always been a solitary pursuit for him, a way to find peace and solace in nature, but it was also a way to connect with others who shared his passion. The sun climbed higher in the sky, and Jacob knew it was time to return to the marina. The reporters and fellow anglers would be waiting for him, eager to continue the celebration. But before he left his quiet spot, Jacob made a silent promise to himself. No matter how many records he set or how many fish he caught, he would always remember why he started fishing in the first place. It was about more than just the thrill of the catch. It was about the love of the sport, the respect for the fish, and the deep, unbreakable bond he felt with the natural world. As Jacob walked back down the dock, he felt a renewed sense of purpose. The record was officially his, and the story of the pike would be told 4 years to come. But for now, he was content to bask in the afterglow of the day's events, to share his story with others, and to quietly savor the knowledge that he had achieved something truly remarkable. Back at the marina, the celebrations were in full swing. Friends and strangers alike gathered around Jacob, eager to hear more about the catch and to congratulate him on his achievement. As the afternoon wore on, Jacob found himself recounting the story again and again, each time with a little more detail, a little more excitement. He could see the awe in people's eyes, the way they hung on his every word, and it made him realize just how special this moment really was. Later that evening, after the crowds had dispersed and the marina had quieted down, Jacob packed up his gear and prepared to head home. The weight of the day's events still lingered in his mind, a mix of exhaustion and exhilaration that left him feeling both fulfilled and humbled. He took one last look at the lake, now bathed in the soft light of the setting sun, and smiled. Today had been a day for the history books, but tomorrow would bring new challenges, new adventures, and new stories to tell. As Jacob drove away from the marina, the golden light of the setting sun reflecting off his rearview mirror, he felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude. He had achieved something truly extraordinary, but he knew that the journey was far from over. There would be more fishing trips, more early mornings on the water, and more opportunities to connect with the sport he loved so deeply. And as he made his way home, the weight of the new state record finally beginning to sink in, Jacob couldn't help but smile. This was just the beginning of a new chapter in his fishing journey, one that he knew would be filled with even more incredible moments and unforgettable memories. As evening descended on Hayden Lake, Jacob Miller found himself alone by the water once more. The marina had grown quiet, the earlier buzz of excitement fading as the day wound down. The sun had dipped below the horizon, leaving the sky awash with hues of pink, orange, and deepening blue. It was the kind of peaceful, serene moment that Jacob had always cherished, the reason he came to this lake day after day, year after year, after the whirlwind of activity, following the official weigh-in and the recording of his new state record. Jacob had decided to stay a little longer. He needed time to reflect on what had happened, to process the magnitude of the day's events. The Pike, the battle, the record, it all felt almost surreal, like something out of a dream. And yet, as he looked out over the calm waters of Hayden Lake, he knew it had all been real. Jacob walked slowly along the shoreline, his footsteps crunching softly on the gravel path. The air was cool, carrying the fresh scent of pine trees and the faint, earthy aroma of the lake. The water lapped gently at the shore, a soothing sound that matched the rhythm of his thoughts. He had spent so many years on this lake, each trip a new adventure, a new opportunity to connect with the natural world. But today had been different. Today, the lake had given him something truly extraordinary. He paused at a familiar spot along the shore, a place where he had often stopped to rest and take in the view. The memories of countless mornings and evenings spent here washed over him, moments of quiet reflection, the thrill of the first bite, the satisfaction of a hard-fought battle with a worthy adversary. This lake had been his sanctuary, a place where he could escape the pressures of everyday life and find peace in the simple act of fishing. Jacob sat down on a large, flat rock by the water's edge, the cool stone grounding him as he gazed out over the lake. The surface of the water was like glass, perfectly still and reflecting the colors of the sunset. It was a scene of such tranquility that it was hard to believe that just hours earlier, this same lake had been the site of an epic struggle between man and fish. The pike was out there somewhere, deep in the water, free once again to roam the lake's depths. Jacob felt a deep sense of respect for the fish, a recognition of its strength, its resilience, and the challenge it had posed. As he sat there, Jacob's thoughts turned to the future. He had just set a new state record, an achievement that few anglers ever reach. It was a momentous occasion, something that would be talked about for years to come. But Jacob knew that his journey as an angler was far from over. There was still more fish to catch, more battles to fight, and more memories to be made. The lake had given him this incredible gift, but it had also renewed his passion for the sport, fueling his desire to keep coming back, to keep pushing his limits. He thought about the years he had spent on this lake, the countless hours of preparation, patience, and persistence. Fishing had always been about more than just the catch for Jacob. It was about the connection to nature, the lessons learned from each experience, and the stories that came out of those moments. The record-breaking pike was the pinnacle of his achievements, but it was also a reminder of why he loved fishing so much. It was a reminder that every day on the water brought something new, something unexpected, and that the journey itself was just as important as the destination. Jacob's thoughts drifted back to the first time he had fished on Hayden Lake, all those years ago. He had been just a boy then, barely able to hold a fishing rod, let alone land a big fish. But even back then, he had felt the same thrill, the same excitement, and the same sense of peace that he felt now. The lake had been a constant in his life, a place where he could always find solace and joy, no matter what else was happening in the world. As the last light of day faded and the stars began to twinkle in the darkening sky, Jacob made a decision. He would return to this spot next year, on the same day, using the same lure, in hopes of recapturing the magic of this moment. It would become a new tradition, a way of honoring the pike that had given him so much and of keeping the spirit of the chase alive. He knew that it was unlikely he would ever catch another fish like the one he had landed today. But that didn't matter. What mattered was the experience, the connection to the lake, and the memories that would stay with him for the rest of his life. Jacob stood up, taking one last look at the tranquil waters of Hayden Lake. The night was settling in, and the air had grown cooler, but he felt warm inside, a deep contentment filling his heart. He knew that he would be back, again and again, as long as the lake called to him. And he knew that every time he cast his line into these waters, he would be reminded of the day he caught the fish of a lifetime. As he walked back to his truck, the stars shining brightly overhead, Jacob felt a sense of closure. The day had been everything he could have hoped for and more. He had set a new record, but more importantly, he had deepened his connection to the lake and to the sport he loved. And as he drove away from Hayden Lake, the memories of the day fresh in his mind, he knew that this was just the beginning of a new chapter in his fishing journey, one that would be filled with even more incredible moments, unforgettable battles, and the quiet, profound joy that only comes from being out on the water. Tomorrow, the sun would rise again over Hayden Lake, and Jacob would be there, ready for whatever the lake had to offer. The sun was barely up the next morning when Jacob Miller's phone started buzzing. Word of his record-breaking catch had spread like wildfire throughout the small towns surrounding Hayden Lake. Anglers, locals, and even people who had never held a fishing rod in their lives were talking about the massive pike that Jacob had landed the day before. The excitement in the community was palpable. Jacob had become something of a local legend overnight. When he finally checked his phone, Jacob was greeted with a flood of messages. Friends and fellow anglers congratulated him, and some asked for details, eager to hear the full story. Even a few distant acquaintances reached out, people Jacob hadn't spoken to in years, wanting to know more about the fish that had everyone talking. There were invites to join fishing groups, requests for interviews from local news outlets, and even a few offers from tackle shops looking to feature him in their advertisements. It was a level of attention had never experienced before, and it was both flattering and overwhelming. After taking a moment to gather his thoughts, Jacob decided to spend the day in town, visiting a few of the places where people had been talking about his catch. He figured it would be a good opportunity to share his story firsthand and to reconnect with the community that had been so supportive of him over the years. His first stop was the local tackle shop, a small, cozy place that had been a second home to Jacob since he was a boy. The shop was filled with everything an angler could need: rods, reels, lures, and all sorts of gear lining the walls, with a few well-worn couches near the front where people could sit and chat. When Jacob walked in, the bell above the door jingled, and the shop's owner, an older man named Hank, looked up from behind the counter. "Well, if it isn't the man of the hour," Hank exclaimed, a broad grin spreading across his face. He stepped out from behind the counter and gave Jacob a hearty handshake. "I heard about that monster pike you caught. That's some feat, Jacob. I knew you had it in you." Jacob smiled, feeling a bit sheepish under the praise. "Thanks, Hank. It was one heck of a fight, that's for sure. I don't think I've ever had a fish put up that much of a struggle." Hank motioned for Jacob to sit down on one of the couches, and within minutes, a small group of regulars had gathered around, eager to hear the story from Jacob himself. He recounted the day's events: the early morning ritual, the first cast, the strike, and the epic battle that had followed. The men listened intently, their eyes widening as Jacob described the pike's aerial assault and the final moments when he landed the behemoth in his boat. As Jacob spoke, Hank couldn't help but interject with his own excitement. "You know, Jacob, Hank said. "I've been in this business a long time, and I've seen some big fish come through these doors, but nothing like what you caught yesterday. You've set a new standard, my friend." The group nodded in agreement, and Jacob felt a surge of pride. These were people who understood what it meant to catch a fish like that, who knew the dedication, skill, and luck it took to land a trophy pike. Their admiration meant the world to him. After leaving the tackle shop, Jacob made his way to the local diner, a classic spot with red vinyl booths, a long counter, and the smell of fresh coffee in the air. It was a place where news traveled fast, and Jacob wasn't surprised to find that the story of his catch had already reached the regulars who gathered there for their morning coffee. As soon as he walked through the door, the conversations quieted, and all eyes turned to him. The diner's owner, a cheerful woman named Marge, waved him over. "Jacob, get over here. I've got your favorite booth waiting for you, and breakfast is on the house today." Jacob chuckled and made his way to the booth, where Marge handed him a steaming mug of coffee. "You've got the whole town talking. You know that," she said with a grin. "I've never seen folks so excited about a fish before." Jacob smiled, taking a sip of his coffee. "It's been a wild 24 hours, that's for sure," he replied. "I'm just glad I got the chance to share the experience with everyone." As he settled into the booth, a few of the diners came over to ask about the fish, and Jacob was happy to share the story once more. The diner buzzed with conversation, people marveling at the size of the pike and the fact that a local had set a new state record. It was clear that Jacob's achievement had brought a sense of pride to the community, and he couldn't help but feel a deep sense of gratitude for the support he was receiving. Later that day, Jacob was approached by a reporter from the local newspaper, who asked if he could do an interview for an upcoming feature. The reporter wanted to highlight not just the catch, but also Jacob's lifelong dedication to fishing and his connection to Hayden Lake. Jacob agreed, seeing it as an opportunity to share his love for the sport and the lake with a wider audience. The interview took place at the lake's edge, where Jacob felt most at home. The reporter asked about his early days of fishing, the mentors who had taught him the ropes, and the countless hours he had spent on the water, honing his skills. Jacob spoke candidly, emphasizing that the record-breaking pike was the result of years of patience, practice, and respect for the fish and the environment. "What's next for you, Jacob?" the reporter asked as the interview drew to a close. "Do you think you'll ever catch another fish like that?" Jacob smiled, looking out over the calm waters of Hayden Lake. "You never know," he said thoughtfully. "Fishing is full of surprises, but whether I catch another record or not, I'll keep coming back to this lake. It's not just about the fish, it's about being out here, connecting with nature, and enjoying the moment. That's what keeps me going." The reporter nodded, clearly impressed by Jacob's humility and passion. "Thank you for sharing your story, Jacob. I think a lot of people are going to be inspired by what you've accomplished." As the day came to an end, Jacob returned to his cabin, his heart full from the day's events. The outpouring of support from the community had been overwhelming, but it had also reinforced what he had always known. Fishing was more than just a solitary pursuit. It was a way of connecting with others, of sharing stories and experiences that brought people together. That night, as he sat by the fire with a cup of coffee in hand, Jacob reflected on the whirlwind of the past few days. The pike, the record, the attention, it was all more than he had ever expected. But as he thought back on everything, he realized that what mattered most was the journey that had brought him to this point. The countless mornings on the lake, the battles won and lost, the friendships forged along the way, those were the things that truly made his life as an angler so rich and rewarding. The legend of Jacob Miller and the record-breaking pike would live on in the town of Hayden, told and retold around campfires, in tackle shops, and at the local diner. But for Jacob, it was just another chapter in a lifelong love affair with the water. And as he closed his eyes that night, the sound of the lake's gentle waves lulling him to sleep, he knew that no matter what the future held, he would always be drawn back to the place where it all began. As the days passed and the buzz around Jacob Miller's record-breaking pike began to settle, life in the small town of Hayden returned to its usual, quiet rhythm. The town's excitement over the catch gradually gave way to the routines of everyday life. But for Jacob, the experience had left a lasting impression. The sense of pride and accomplishment lingered, but so did a feeling of introspection. He had achieved something extraordinary, yet he knew that this milestone was just one part of a much larger journey. One crisp morning, a few weeks after the historic catch, Jacob found himself back at Hayden Lake. The early spring air had given way to the warmer breezes of late April, and the ice that had once clung to the shoreline was now completely gone. The lake was fully open, its waters calm and inviting under a cloudless sky. The familiar sounds of birdsong and the rustling of leaves in the trees filled the air, creating a peaceful backdrop as Jacob prepared for another day on the water. This time, however, the trip felt different. Jacob wasn't out to break records or to chase after trophy fish. He was there simply to reconnect with the lake, to enjoy the solitude and the quiet beauty that had always drawn him to the water. He had brought his usual gear: rods, reels, a selection of lures, but he wasn't focused on catching anything specific. Instead, he was content to let the day unfold naturally, to follow wherever the lake might lead him. As he launched his boat and motored out to one of his favorite spots, Jacob couldn't help but reflect on how much had changed since that fateful day. The recognition, the interviews, the sudden notoriety, it had all been a whirlwind, something he had never sought, but had graciously accepted. Yet as the lake's calm waters stretched out before him, Jacob felt a deep sense of clarity. The lake had given him so much peace, joy, and now a place in the record books, but it had also reminded him of why he loved fishing in the first place. Jacob cut the engine and let the boat drift, the gentle current carrying him toward a secluded cove lined with tall pines. The water here was shallow and clear, the lake bed visible beneath the surface. He cast his line, watching as the lure sank slowly into the depths, sending ripples across the glassy water. It was a moment of pure serenity, the kind of quiet simplicity that had always made fishing so special to him. As he waited, his mind drifted to the future. The state record had been an incredible achievement, but Jacob knew that his journey as an angler was far from over. There were still so many places to explore, so many different species to target, and so many more lessons to learn from the water. The pike had been a monumental catch, but it was just one chapter in the story of his life on the lake. Jacob thought about the upcoming seasons, about the bass that would be biting in the summer, the trout that would be more active as the water warmed, and the full pike that would once again become his primary quarry. He thought about the new techniques he wanted to try, the different lures he planned to experiment with, and the possibility of venturing to other lakes and rivers to test his skills against different kinds of fish. The thrill of the chase was still very much alive in him, and the possibilities were endless, but more than anything, Jacob looked forward to the moments of quiet reflection that fishing always provided. He cherished the early mornings, when the world was just waking up and the lake was his alone. He valued the patience required to outwit a wary fish, the focus needed to land a big catch, and the humility to accept the ones that got away. These were the experiences that had shaped him as an angler and as a person, and he knew they would continue to do so for the rest of his life. The rod tip twitched slightly, pulling Jacob out of his thoughts. He felt a gentle tug on the line, and he slowly reeled in, sensing a small fish testing the lure. A few seconds later, a modest-sized bass surfaced, its green and gold scales glistening in the sunlight. Jacob smiled as he gently unhooked the fish, admiring its beauty before releasing it back into the water. It wasn't a trophy catch, but that didn't matter. It was a reminder of the simple joys that fishing had always brought him. As the day wore on, Jacob moved from spot to spot, casting his line and enjoying the rhythm of the water. He caught a few more fish, each one adding to the quiet satisfaction of the day. There were no crowds, no cameras, and no pressure, just Jacob, the lake, and the endless possibilities that stretched out before him. By late afternoon, the sun had begun its slow descent toward the horizon, casting long shadows across the lake. Jacob decided it was time to head back to shore, his heart full from a day well spent. As he steered the boat toward the dock, he felt a deep sense of contentment. The record-breaking pike had been a highlight of his life, but it was the everyday experiences on the lake that truly defined his passion for fishing. As he secured the boat and began packing up his gear, Jacob noticed a few familiar faces on the dock, fellow anglers who had heard about his catch and wanted to congratulate him. They waved as he approached, and Jacob greeted them with a warm smile. They chatted for a while, exchanging stories about their recent fishing trips and discussing plans for the coming weeks. It was a simple, friendly exchange, but it reinforced something that Jacob had always known. Fishing wasn't just about the fish. It was about the community, the shared experiences, and the bonds that formed between people who shared a love for the water. As the sun dipped below the treetops, casting a golden glow over the lake, Jacob took one last look at the water before heading home. The lake was still, its surface reflecting the colors of the sky, a perfect mirror. It was a scene of such tranquility that Jacob felt a profound sense of gratitude. This place had given him so much more than just a record or a trophy fish. It had given him a lifetime of memories, a sense of purpose, and a connection to something greater than himself. Driving back to his cabin, Jacob thought about the future with renewed excitement. He knew there were more adventures to come, more fish to catch, and more stories to be written. But no matter where his journey as an angler took him, Hayden Lake would always be at the heart of it all. It was the place where his love for fishing had begun, where he had learned the lessons that had shaped him, and where he had achieved the greatest catch of his life. And as he pulled into his driveway, the sun setting behind him, Jacob knew that tomorrow he would be back on the water, ready for whatever the lake had to offer. The journey was far from over, and Jacob was eager to see where it would lead him next. As summer approached, the days grew longer, and Hayden Lake came alive with activity. The warm weather drew families to the water for picnics, swimming, and boating. Fishermen flocked to the lake, hoping to catch a glimpse of the elusive giant pike that had put Hayden Lake on the map, thanks to Jacob Miller's record-breaking catch. But while others were chasing the legend, Jacob had something else in mind, something more personal. In the weeks following his monumental catch, Jacob had been thinking about how to honor the experience. He wanted to create a tradition that would celebrate not just the fish he had caught, but the love he had for the lake and the sport itself. He decided that each year, on the anniversary of that unforgettable day, he would return to the exact spot where he had landed the pike. He would use the same lure, the same rod, and the same tactics, not necessarily to catch another record fish, but to reconnect with the memory and the meaning behind it. The idea of a new tradition resonated deeply with Jacob. Fishing had always been about more than just the catch for him. It was about the rituals, the quiet moments of reflection, and the deep connection to nature. Establishing this yearly tradition felt like the perfect way to honor those values and keep the spirit of that incredible day alive. As the anniversary of the record-breaking catch approached, Jacob began preparing for the event with the same meticulous care he always put into his fishing trips. He made sure his gear was in top condition, checking the rod and reel that had served him so well the year before. He selected the exact same lure, a large, silver spoon that had proven irresistible to the pike, and made sure it was tied perfectly. This was more than just another fishing trip. It was a symbolic act, a way of honoring the past while looking forward to the future. The night before the anniversary, Jacob found himself unable to sleep, his mind buzzing with anticipation. He lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, replaying the events of the previous year in his mind: the strike, the battle, the weigh-in, and the quiet moments of reflection by the lake. It had been a day unlike any other, and he couldn't help but wonder what tomorrow would bring. When the morning finally came, Jacob was up before dawn. The air was cool, with a light mist rising off the lake as the first rays of sunlight peeked over the horizon. It was a perfect fishing day, the kind that seemed almost designed to remind him of why he loved the sport so much. He loaded his gear into his truck, feeling a familiar sense of excitement and purpose as he drove down the winding road to Hayden Lake. Arriving at the lake, Jacob felt a wave of nostalgia as he launched his boat and set out toward the spot where he had caught the pike. The water was calm and smooth, the surface reflecting the soft colors of the morning sky. The lake was quiet, with only the sound of his motor cutting through the stillness as he made his way to the same secluded cove where the battle had taken place. When he reached the spot, Jacob cut the engine and let the boat drift. He took a deep breath, inhaling the fresh, pine-scented air, and felt a sense of peace settle over him. This was where it had all happened, where he had experienced one of the greatest moments of his life. But today, he wasn't here to chase another record. He was here to remember, to honor the lake and the fish that had given him so much. He cast his line, the silver spoon lure arcing through the air before landing with a soft plunk in the water. Jacob watched as the ripples spread out from the point of impact, feeling the tension in the line as the lure sank slowly toward the bottom. It was a familiar motion, one he had performed countless times, but today it felt different, more meaningful, more deliberate. As he worked the lure, Jacob's mind wandered back to the events of the past year. The attention he had received, the new connections he had made, and the way his life had changed because of that one incredible catch. But despite all the changes, one thing had remained constant: his love for the lake and the simple, profound joy he found in fishing. This new tradition was a way of grounding himself, of reminding him of what truly mattered. The morning passed quietly, the lake offering up a few small bites, but no serious strikes. Jacob didn't mind. He wasn't there to break records or land another trophy. He was there for the ritual, for the experience of being on the water, and for the connection to a memory that had become a part of him. The act of casting, reeling, and waiting was enough. It was a way of paying tribute to the fish that had changed his life and to the lake that had given him so much. As the sun climbed higher in the sky, casting a warm, golden light over the water, Jacob decided to call it a day. He reeled in his line, feeling a deep sense of contentment. The fish might not have been biting, but that didn't matter. What mattered was that he had honored the tradition he had set for himself, and in doing so, had reconnected with the essence of what made fishing so special to him. Back at the dock, Jacob secured his boat and took a moment to look out over the lake. The water sparkled in the sunlight, a scene of perfect tranquility. He smiled, knowing that he would return next year, and the year after that, to continue the tradition he had started. It was a way of keeping the memory of that incredible day alive, a reminder that fishing was about more than just the catch. It was about the journey, the experience, and the love for the water. As he packed up his gear and headed home, Jacob felt a deep sense of fulfillment. The tradition he had created was not just a tribute to a single fish, but a celebration of everything he loved about fishing and the lake that had been his sanctuary for so many years. And as he drove away, the sun shining brightly over Hayden Lake, Jacob knew that this was a tradition he would carry with him for the rest of his life. Each year, on the anniversary of that fateful day, Jacob would return to Hayden Lake, casting his line into the same waters that had given him the fish of a lifetime. It was a way of honoring the past, celebrating the present, and looking forward to the future, a future filled with more days on the water, more moments of quiet reflection, and more opportunities to connect with the sport that had shaped his life. As the summer months rolled on, and Hayden Lake continued to buzz with activity, Jacob Miller began to notice something different. It wasn't just the record-breaking pike or the growing reputation of the lake that caught his attention. It was the increasing number of young anglers who were showing up at the water's edge, rods in hand, eager to try their luck. Some of them were local kids, while others had traveled from farther afield, drawn by the stories of Jacob's legendary catch. Jacob saw in these young fishermen a reflection of his younger self, the same wide-eyed excitement, the same hunger for adventure, and the same deep curiosity about the mysteries that lay beneath the surface of the lake. It wasn't long before he began to feel a sense of responsibility, a desire to pass on what he had learned over the years, to help the next generation of anglers develop their skills and share in the joy that fishing had brought him. One afternoon, as Jacob was preparing to head out on the lake, he noticed a small group of kids gathered near the dock. They were chatting excitedly, their fishing rods clutched in their hands, eyes scanning the water for any signs of movement. Jacob smiled to himself as he watched them, remembering how he had been at their age, full of dreams of catching the biggest fish in the lake. Eager to learn and ready for adventure, he decided to approach them, wanting to offer some guidance and maybe a few tips that could help them on their journey. As he walked over, the kids fell silent, recognizing him immediately. The legend of Jacob Miller had spread far and wide, and to these young anglers, he was a hero, a living testament to what was possible on Hayden Lake. "Hey there," Jacob said, his voice friendly and warm. "You all planning to do some fishing today?" The kids nodded enthusiastically, their eyes wide with anticipation. One of them, a boy named Ethan, stepped forward, his excitement barely contained. "Mr. Miller, do you have any tips for us? We've been trying to catch a big one, but so far, we've only gotten small bass and bluegill." Jacob chuckled, remembering the countless days he had spent as a boy, dreaming of landing a monster fish. He could see the same determination in these kids, and he felt a strong desire to help them succeed. "Well, catching a big fish isn't just about luck," Jacob said, crouching down so he was eye level with the group. "It takes patience, practice, and a little bit of know-how. But most importantly, it's about respecting the water and the fish you're trying to catch." He spent the next few minutes walking them through some of the basics: how to choose the right lure, how to cast effectively, and how to read the water for signs of fish activity. He showed them how to tie a strong knot, how to set the hook properly, and how to play a fish once it was on the line. The kids listened intently, soaking up every word, their faces alight with excitement. "Remember," Jacob said, "fishing is as much about the experience as it is about the catch. Don't get discouraged if you don't land a big one right away. Keep practicing, enjoy the time on the water, and the fish will come." Ethan, the boy who had spoken first, looked up at Jacob with admiration in his eyes. "Do you think we could catch a pike like the one you caught?" he asked, his voice full of hope. Jacob smiled, seeing a bit of himself in Ethan's question. "You never know," he said. "That's the beauty of fishing, you never know what's going to be on the other end of the line. But if you keep at it, you just might surprise yourself." The kids thanked Jacob profusely, clearly inspired by his words and eager to put his advice into practice. As they headed down the dock, casting their lines into the water with newfound confidence, Jacob felt a deep sense of satisfaction. He had given them more than just tips on fishing. He had shared with them a piece of the passion that had fueled his life for so many years. Over the following weeks, Jacob made it a point to spend more time with the young anglers who frequented the lake. He would stop by the dock in the mornings, offering advice and encouragement, or take a few of them out on his boat, showing them the best spots and techniques for catching different species. He taught them how to read the weather, how to respect the environment, and how to appreciate the quiet moments on the water that made fishing so special. It wasn't long before word spread, and more young anglers began seeking out Jacob's guidance. They saw him as a mentor, a master of the craft who was generous with his time and knowledge. Jacob welcomed them all, finding great joy in sharing his love for fishing with the next generation. It wasn't just about teaching them how to catch fish, it was about instilling in them a respect for the water, a patience for the process, and a deep appreciation for the natural world. One day, while out on the lake with a group of young anglers, Jacob noticed that Ethan, the boy he had first met by the dock, was particularly focused. Ethan had taken to heart everything Jacob had taught him, and his determination was paying off. He had developed a good cast, learned how to work different lures, and was starting to understand the rhythms of the lake. As they drifted near a promising spot, Jacob watched as Ethan cast his line with precision, the lure landing exactly where he wanted it. The boy was quiet, patient, his eyes fixed on the water, waiting for that telltale tug on the line. And then, it happened. Ethan's rod tip jerked downward, and the reel began to whir as something big took the bait. For a moment, Ethan froze, a mix of shock and excitement washing over him. But then he remembered Jacob's teachings, and he reacted just as he had been taught. He tightened his grip on the rod, keeping the line taut, but not too tight, allowing the fish to run while maintaining control. The battle was on, and it was clear that Ethan was hooked into something significant. Jacob watched with a proud smile as Ethan fought the fish, guiding him with calm words of encouragement. The boy handled the situation beautifully, showing a maturity and skill beyond his years. The fish made several powerful runs, but Ethan held on, playing it just as Jacob had taught him. After several intense minutes, the fish began to tire, and Ethan slowly reeled it closer to the boat. When the fish finally surfaced, everyone in the boat gasped. It wasn't a pike like Jacob's legendary catch, but it was a sizable largemouth bass, its green and gold scales shimmering in the sunlight. It was the biggest fish Ethan had ever caught, and as Jacob helped him lift it into the boat, the boy's face lit up with pure joy. "You did it, Ethan," Jacob said, clapping the boy on the shoulder. "That's a beautiful fish. You should be proud." Ethan beamed, holding the base up for everyone to see. The other kids in the boat cheered, and Jacob could see that this moment would stay with Ethan forever, just as his own record-breaking catch had stayed with him. It was a moment of triumph, of connection, and of passing the torch from one generation to the next. As they headed back to the dock, Ethan cradled the base carefully, his face glowing with pride. When they reached shore, Jacob helped him take a few photos with the fish before showing him how to release it safely back into the water. Ethan watched as the base swam away, his eyes filled with wonder and gratitude. From that day on, Ethan became a regular fixture at the lake, always eager to learn more, always pushing himself to improve. Jacob took him under his wing, mentoring him more closely, and it wasn't long before the boy began catching bigger and bigger fish, each one a testament to his growing skill and dedication. For Jacob, these moments of mentorship brought a new sense of purpose to his fishing. He had achieved so much on the lake, but now he found just as much satisfaction in helping others discover the joys of the sport. Watching these young anglers develop their skills, grow in confidence, and connect with the water reminded Jacob of why he had fallen in love with fishing in the first place. As the summer drew to a close, Jacob realized that he had created something special, a community of young anglers who shared his passion and respected the lake as much as he did. He knew that even after he was gone, these kids would carry on the traditions he had taught them, passing down the knowledge and the love for the sport to future generations. One evening, as the sun set over Hayden Lake, casting a golden glow across the water, Jacob sat on the dock with Ethan, the two of them quietly reflecting on the day. The lake was calm, the air cool and still, and the sounds of nature filled the silence between them. "Mr. Miller," Ethan said softly, breaking the quiet, "thank you for everything you've taught me. I never would have caught that bass without your help." Jacob smiled, looking out at the water. "You've got a natural talent, Ethan," he said. "But more than that, you've got the right attitude. You respect the lake, you're patient, and you don't give up. That's what makes a great angler." Ethan nodded, a thoughtful expression on his face. "I want to keep learning," he said. "I want to be as good as you someday." Jacob chuckled, feeling a deep sense of pride. "You're already on your way," he replied. "And remember, it's not just about being the best, it's about enjoying every moment on the water, appreciating the beauty of nature, and sharing the experience with others. That's what really matters." As the last light of day faded, Jacob and Ethan packed up their gear and headed home, both of them content with the day's fishing. Jacob knew that he had found something even more valuable than the record he had set away to give back, to share his love for fishing, and to inspire the next generation of anglers. It was a new chapter in his life, one that filled him with as much joy and satisfaction as any catch ever had. And as he drove away from the lake, the sky darkening into night, Jacob felt a deep sense of peace. The torch had been passed, the legacy continued, and the love for Hayden Lake and the sport of fishing would live on in the hands of those who followed in his footsteps. As the seasons changed, Hayden Lake transformed from the lively summer hub it had been into a quieter, more reflective place. The once busy docks and shorelines now stood calm and still, the vibrant green of the trees slowly turning to shades of gold, red, and orange as fall took hold. For Jacob Miller, this was one of his favorite times of the year, a time when the lake was at its most serene, and the fish, particularly the northern pike, were more active as they prepared for the coming winter. The record-breaking pike Jacob had caught seemed like a distant memory now, though its impact on his life and the community remained strong. Jacob's days were still filled with fishing, mentoring young anglers, and spending quiet moments on the water, but there was something else that continued to drive him, an unquenchable thirst for the chase, the thrill of the unknown, and the possibility of what might be waiting beneath the surface. One crisp autumn morning, Jacob found himself back on the lake, the air cool and crisp, with a hint of frost on the ground. The water was smooth, with only the slightest ripple disturbing its glassy surface. The sky was a clear, brilliant blue, the kind of sky that made the fall colors on the trees stand out even more vividly. It was the perfect day for fishing, and Jacob felt that familiar excitement stir within him as he prepared his gear. Today, he wasn't looking for anything specific, no record-breaking fish, no trophy catches to mount on the wall. Instead, he was here for the simple joy of fishing, the thrill of the hunt, and the quiet satisfaction that came from spending time in nature. But even as he told himself this, Jacob couldn't ignore the little spark of anticipation that always flickered when he cast his line into the water. The possibility of another big catch, another epic battle, was always in the back of his mind. He steered his boat toward a spot he knew well, a secluded cove where the pike liked to gather as the water cooled. The cove was sheltered by tall pines and hardwoods, their leaves rustling gently in the breeze. The sun was still low in the sky, casting long shadows across the water, and Jacob could see a few fish breaking the surface, their sleek bodies sending ripples across the lake. It was a good sign, and he felt that familiar thrill as he anchored the boat and prepared to cast. Jacob selected a large, brightly colored spoon from his tackle box, the same type of lure that had proven so effective in the past. He tied it to his line, checking the knot carefully, then cast it out into the deeper water just beyond the edge of the cove. The lure sailed through the air in a graceful arc before landing with a soft splash, sending tiny waves radiating outward. Jacob watched intently as the lure sank, feeling the tension in the line as he began to reel it in, working it with a gentle, rhythmic motion. The minutes ticked by in silence, broken only by the sound of the reel and the occasional call of a bird overhead. Jacob's mind wandered as he fished, reflecting on the events of the past year and the countless hours he had spent on this lake. He thought about the young anglers he had mentored, the friendships he had deepened, and the many fish he had caught and released. Each day on the water was different, each experience unique, and yet there was a comforting familiarity to it all, a sense of continuity that had become a central part of his life. As the lure neared the boat, Jacob paused, letting it sink back down before starting the retrieve again. He had learned long ago that patience was key, especially with big pike. These fish were smart, cautious, and often required just the right combination of timing, technique, and luck to catch. But that was part of the thrill, the chase, the challenge, the endless pursuit of that perfect moment when everything came together. Just as Jacob was about to reel in for another cast, he felt it, a sudden, sharp tug on the line, a powerful jolt that sent a rush of adrenaline through his veins. His heart leapt as the rod bent sharply, the tip dipping toward the water as the line went taut. It was a strike, and from the feel of it, this was no ordinary fish. The drag on his reel began to scream as the fish made its first run, the line peeling out at an alarming rate. Jacob tightened his grip on the rod, bracing himself against the pull, his muscles tensing as he fought to keep control. This was another battle, another chance to test his skills against a worthy adversary. And just like that, Jacob was fully in the moment, every thought, every sensation focused on the fight unfolding before him. The pike stayed deep, using its weight and strength to resist Jacob's efforts to bring it to the surface. It was a powerful fish, its movement strong and deliberate, and Jacob could feel the tension in the line with every twist and turn. He knew he had to be patient, to let the fish tire itself out before trying to reel it in too quickly. The minutes stretched on, each one filled with the struggle between man and fish, a contest of wills that both exhilarated and exhausted him. As the fish continued to fight, Jacob began to gain ground, slowly but surely bringing it closer to the boat. The pike made a few more desperate runs, each one shorter and less powerful than the last, until finally Jacob felt it begin to weaken. He carefully reeled in the line, keeping the tension steady, his eyes fixed on the water as he anticipated the first glimpse of his quarry. And then, there it was, a flash of silver green beneath the surface, the broad head of the pike appearing as it was coaxed upward. Jacob's heart pounded as the fish broke the surface, its sleek body thrashing in a final attempt to escape. It was a large pike, not as massive as the one he had caught the previous year, but still an impressive specimen, its scales glinting in the sunlight. Jacob reached for his net, maneuvering it under the fish with practiced ease. The pike struggled briefly as it was lifted from the water, but its energy was spent, and Jacob soon had it safely in the boat. He admired the fish for a moment, taking in its size and strength, before carefully removing the hook. It was a beautiful fish, its muscular body a testament to the power and resilience of the species. After taking a quick photo to commemorate the catch, Jacob gently released the pike back into the lake. He watched as it swam away, disappearing into the depths with a flick of its tail. The thrill of the chase was over, the battle won, but Jacob felt a deep sense of satisfaction as he watched the water return to its calm, undisturbed state. As he packed up his gear and prepared to head back to shore, Jacob felt a familiar sense of contentment wash over him. The endless chase, the pursuit of the next big fish, the next great adventure, was what kept him coming back to the lake year after year. It wasn't just about the records or the trophies. It was about the experience, the connection to the water, and the knowledge that every day on the lake was a gift. The sun was beginning to set as Jacob motored back toward the dock, the sky painted with hues of orange and pink. The lake was quiet, the air cool and crisp, and Jacob felt at peace as he steered the boat across the water. He knew that there would be more fish to catch, more battles to fight, and more stories to tell. But for now, he was content to simply enjoy the moment, to bask in the satisfaction of a day well spent on the water. As he docked the boat and began the short walk to his truck, Jacob looked back at the lake, the water now reflecting the deepening colors of the twilight sky. He smiled, knowing that he would be back tomorrow, and the day after that, always ready for the next challenge, the next chase. The journey was far from over, and Jacob wouldn't have it any other way. The lake, with all its mysteries and challenges, would continue to call to him, and he would continue to answer, rod in hand, heart full of anticipation. The endless chase, the thrill of the unknown, the pursuit of that perfect moment was what made fishing more than just a hobby for Jacob. It was a way of life, a passion that would stay with him for as long as he was able to cast a line into the water. And as he drove away from the lake, the stars beginning to twinkle in the darkening sky, Jacob knew that the journey, with all its twists and turns, was the real prize. The fish were just a bonus. This is where the story ends. Share your opinion in the comments. Did you like the story?